a bigotry we decided to investigate when Celtic and Rangers met for an under-19s Youth Cup final match. Even though this is a match between the youth teams of Rangers and Celtic, it's expected that the crowd inside will be around 10,000. We sent in undercover reporters secretly to film both sets of fans to see if there'd be any evidence of sectarianism at this level. They chose which end each would cover.
Toss the coin, still
Our reporters mingled with the crowd, which was generally good-natured. But then we started to hear chants of bigotry. Celtic supporters singing a pro-IRA song. And Rangers supporters singing a sectarian song. Disturbingly, there was a policeman standing next to the Rangers fans, who appeared not to intervene. Strathclyde police say sectarianism isn't a problem you can arrest your way out of. The issue was why people thought it appropriate to sing such offensive songs and at a Youth Cup final. Strathclyde police told us they vigilantly police all football matches and don't tolerate sectarian chanting. But from what we heard, sectarianism's never far from the surface. That was also a young Islander's experience when he arrived on the mainland 35 years ago.
I came from the Isle of Arran at the age of 17 to university on the Scottish mainland, and came across the kind of discussions and comments and at times abuse that I had never experienced on the island, and realised that there was a problem. And sad to say that more than 20 years later, when I became First Minister, that problem was still there. So I was determined from the word go that if I could do one thing as First Minister, it would be to speak out, to step up and to make change happen.
We are sending a clear message that this kind of small-minded behaviour will not be tolerated in a Scotland of the 21st century.
Scotland's first anti-sectarian legislation 8 years ago emerged from Jack McConnell's initiative. It allowed courts to impose additional penalties when the victim was targeted because of their religion or the crime had a sectarian element. It was meant to address notorious crimes like the one which occurred outside this pub. Mark Scott was murdered simply for wearing a Celtic top. Recently, however, Jack McConnell feels progress has stalled.
I don't know whether the new Scottish Government after 2007 thought this wasn't really a problem, or they were under pressure from certain vested interests to pull back, or whatever the reason was. And I accept people can make mistakes, but they did take their foot off the pedal, and everybody knows that, including them.
If sectarianism is on the increase again, is that a result of the failure of governments to take the issue seriously? That certainly was the experience of one charity working in the field.
We found it very difficult to engage politicians in a meaningful way in supporting the anti-sectarian cause. There was a few exceptions to that who were very committed, but on the whole, a lot of people didn't really want to be associated with the issue, and I can understand that. But when you want to tackle sectarianism, you really have to stand up and be counted, and you have to be prepared to take flack, and perhaps to some degree be unpopular with certain people who, perhaps have a vested interest in the problem continuing, or perhaps feel uncomfortable with the idea of attitudes and behaviour being challenged.
There are just 3 small charities who specialise in this field. This one's just begun working with school children to educate them about sectarianism. All acknowledge the challenge of continuing work faced with spending cuts imposed by central and local government.
When the funding is so short-term, it's difficult to develop projects, it's difficult to develop plans and alliances, and it's difficult to know what steps you can take in the longer term.
If actions against sectarianism had become a lower priority, it was firmly back on the political agenda after this clash, which led directly to a summit being called to address the problem. Old Firm clubs, along with football chiefs, were summoned to Edinburgh to meet the First Minister and senior Strathclyde police officers. They established a joint action group to tackle the issue. But just 7 weeks after the summit, Rangers were fined by UEFA for sectarian chanting. So are those who can act doing enough?
It is essential that people who are in positions of leadership on both sides of the divide show that leadership and don't just expect it to come from somebody else. And I have to say that is essential in the churches, it's essential in the football clubs, it's essential in public figures, academics and others, who have a connection with one side of the divide or the other. People have to be even-handed in their comments and show a determination to change their own side as well as help with change for the other.
If Jack McConnell is right, then while the problem may be with the fans, the solution lies with people like Cardinal Keith O'Brien, the most senior Catholic figure in Britain.
I would do my best if I was in a position of responsibility that way in controlling these crowds to say no sectarian songs at all. And I say exactly the same about sectarian marches. If we were singing against the Jewish faith or singing against Muslims or whatever else at the present time, we would soon be in court. And why is it allowed that this does take place and sometimes encouraged by the tremendous number singing these songs?
In that regard, would you see both sides as being equally misguided or equally bad?
Yes, I would see both sides with regard to the parades, sectarian singing and so on. None of that really should be happening.
So what are these songs, so hateful and in some cases illegal? The Rangers song most often cited as offensive is banned under sectarian legislation because of lyrics about Fenian blood, seen as glorying in the death of Irish Catholics. The Celtic chants most often cited as offensive are those which glorify the IRA. Both groups of chants are outlawed by the clubs. But what do fans themselves think? We brought Danny, a Celtic man, and Rangers supporter Andy together to talk about this divisive issue.
How you doing, Danny? I'm Andy.
How you doing? Nice to meet you, man.
Cheers. People that are coming out to watch the team, you hope that their passion is for the team to be successful and do well, not to go out to cause problems for us.
You don't find that anti-Protestant agenda within the Celtic support. It just doesn't exist. In terms of political expressions within the Celtic support that people find distasteful, well, that's a different ballgame. It's not sectarian. But we have to have a positive or an educated dialogue about what it is, the opinion these people are expressing.
Yeah, because I actually think, and I can't say this is based on any scientific research, but I think the people that get wound up about it isn't necessarily because they think the Celtic fans are Catholics or they're Irish. I think it's that sort of, narrower issue around, the IRA and the terrorism and people's images of that. I think it's as narrow as that.
What the Celtic fans are singing about is the IRA, Irish freedom fighters who were involved in the Irish Wars of Independence, which is a completely different thing.
The fans can't agree which songs are offensive, even though the clubs have banned the singing of many of them. Best-selling author Christopher Brookmyre thinks that this is at the root of the problem.
I think it dilutes the problem in that we don't end up having the debates that the issues dictate we ought to be having. There's a confusion between objectivity and balance, and the sense is that in order to be objective, you